He's not dead, poor black girl stops billionaire's funeral to save him. The church bells tolled, their slow rhythm echoing through the cloudy afternoon. Rows of black cars lined the street, their polished doors reflecting the gray sky. People whispered in hushed voices, shuffling into the grand hall where the billionaire's funeral was about to begin. It was meant to be a day of silence, a day of mourning, a day where the world said goodbye to Ezra Kingsley, one of the richest men in North America. The air inside the cathedral was heavy. Gold-trimmed drapes framed the tall stained glass windows, and the scent of fresh lilies filled every corner. At the front, in a coffin carved from mahogany and lined with ivory satin, lay Ezra Kingsley's body, or at least that's what everyone believed. But then chaos broke the silence. A small voice pierced the room. He's not dead. Every head turned. There, standing barefoot near the aisle, was a young black girl no one had invited. Her clothes were plain, her braids slightly undone, her skin dusty from running. Her name was Talia Brooks, and her eyes were wide with something stronger than fear, certainty. She pointed at the coffin, her hand shaking but her voice clear. "I said he's not dead." Murmurs spread like wildfire, guests gasped. A woman in pearls clutched her chest. A man in a dark suit shook his head, muttering, "Ridiculous, get her out of here." But Talia didn't move. She pressed forward, her bare feet slapping against the marble floor, echoing louder than the murmurs. "I saw him breathe," she insisted. "You can't bury him yet." To understand why her words sent shockwaves through the hall, you need to know who Ezra Kingsley was. He wasn't just any man. He was the kind of figure who made headlines with a single move. From humble beginnings in Nova Scotia, he had clawed his way into wealth through shipping, technology, and later, philanthropy. His name was stamped on hospitals, libraries, and even a wing of the university. The world saw him as untouchable, powerful, eternal. But 2 days earlier, headlines had announced his sudden passing after a stroke in his mansion. Doctors claimed his heart had stopped. Reporters confirmed it. The public believed it. Yet here was Talia, a girl no one knew, declaring the impossible. "Who is that child?" someone asked. "She's lying, the poor thing wants attention. She should be removed before she disturbs the service." The murmurs grew louder, but so did Talia's courage. She broke through the line of mourners and moved closer to the casket. Her chest heaved with each breath, but her eyes stayed locked on the man inside. His skin was pale, yes, his hands rested still, but she swore she had seen a faint twitch of his finger when they carried him in. She swore she had seen the rise and fall of his chest. "Please," she cried, her voice cracking but urgent. "Just check, please, he's alive." This was not just a funeral, it was a performance of wealth, power, and legacy. Ezra's daughter, Eloane Kingsley, stood at the front in her black dress, her blonde hair pulled back in a braid. She was only 12, but the weight of her father's empire already sat on her small shoulders. She stared at Talia with confusion. Behind her, Ezra's business partners shifted uneasily. They whispered to one another, worried not about the truth of Talia's words but about appearances. A scandal at the funeral of a billionaire, that was unacceptable. One of the men stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Someone remove her, now." 2 ushers moved to grab Talia's arms, but she wriggled free, her voice rising in desperation. "You'll kill him if you bury him, don't you see he's still here?" Her scream ricocheted off the cathedral walls, silencing the murmurs. For a brief moment, everyone froze. Now here where you, the one hearing this story, should pause and think. What would you have done if you were there? Would you have trusted the doctors, the reports, the official story? Or would you have believed the eyes of a little girl who had nothing to gain but everything to lose? This story is not just about a funeral. It's about how truth often hides in places we don't expect. It's about listening when no one else will. And if you keep watching, you'll see how this moment didn't just save a man's life, it changed the lives of everyone in that cathedral. Because the truth was about to come out. Talia stood her ground, shaking but firm. She knew what it felt like to be ignored, to be invisible. She had grown up on the edge of town in a rundown apartment where rent was a struggle and meals were uncertain. She didn't have fancy clothes, she didn't have money, and she certainly didn't have the right to interrupt the funeral of a billionaire. But she had something stronger than all of that, courage. She looked into the coffin again. Ezra's lips were pale, yes. His chest was still, yes. But she noticed something that no one else did, the faintest drop of moisture near his nose. Her heart pounded, she pointed again. Look at him, he's breathing." Gasps echoed, heads tilted. A woman near the front leaned closer to the casket, squinting. And then came the moment that cracked the room open. Ezra's hand twitched. It was small, barely noticeable, but undeniable. Screams filled the cathedral. Some shouted in fear, some in disbelief, some in joy. Ushers stumbled back. A man dropped his program, the papers scattering like birds. Eloan gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Papa," she whispered, her voice trembling. Talia's eyes filled with tears. "I told you," she said softly, almost to herself. "I told you he wasn't gone." Doctors rushed forward, pushing through the crowd. They checked his pulse, their faces draining of color as they realized what the girl had seen all along. He has a heartbeat," one stammered. "He's alive." The hall fell silent, the kind of silence that crushes everything beneath it. People stared at the girl, the billionaire, the impossible truth. And in that silence, the story truly began. This was not just a funeral anymore. It was the unraveling of a mystery, the start of a battle between what people wanted to believe and what was real. Talia Brooks had stopped the burial of a billionaire, but she had no idea that saving him would pull her into a world of secrets, enemies, and choices that could destroy her life or make her a hero. And as for Ezra Kingsley, waking up would be only the beginning of a story the world would never forget. The cathedral was no longer a place of mourning, it had become a storm of noise and disbelief. The air crackled with gasps, cries, and the shuffle of restless feet. People who had moments ago bowed their heads in reverence now leaned over the casket, straining their necks to see with their own eyes. Ezra Kingsley's fingers twitched again, this time stronger, unmistakable. The hand that had built an empire was moving. Not lying lifeless as the world had been told. "Impossible," muttered a man in a navy suit. His eyes darted toward the doors as though escape was the only way to handle what had just happened. Another voice rose from the back. "The man is alive." It was chaos now. Chairs scraped against the marble floor as mourners stumbled back, some fearful, others desperate to confirm the miracle. The ushers who had tried to drag Talia away moments ago now stood frozen, their faces pale, their hands trembling at their sides. And there, in the middle of the madness, stood Talia Brooks, barefoot, braids falling out, tears glistening on her cheeks. She was no longer the girl they had dismissed. She was the girl who had spoken truth when no one else dared. But not everyone was grateful. At the front, Ezra's closest business partner, Richard Halloway, clutched his chest. His lips were thin with fury. "This is a disgrace," he hissed. "Doctors declared him gone. Do you know what this means if it spreads? Do you know the scandal, the questions?" His eyes cut toward Talia with a glare sharp enough to wound. The doctors leaned over Ezra's body, their instruments shaking in their hands. One pressed 2 fingers against his neck, then looked up with disbelief. "His pulse is faint, but it's there. He's alive." The crowd erupted again, this time louder, like thunder tearing the roof. Eloan Kingsley, Ezra's 12-year-old daughter, stepped closer. She was trembling, her small frame shaking beneath the weight of her black dress. For a moment, she was just a child, not the daughter of the richest man in the hall, not the heiress of a fortune, just a girl who thought she'd lost her father forever. Her lips quivered as she whispered, "Papa." Talia's throat burned, but she smiled through the tears. "He's coming back, I told you." The girl and the heiress locked eyes for the first time. 2 children from different worlds, one in pearls, one in dust, but in that moment both carried the same hope, the same fear. The doctors shouted orders, "Get him out of the coffin, quickly, he needs oxygen." Strong arms lifted Ezra carefully, laying him flat on a stretcher. The sight was eerie, a man dressed for death, ivory satin still clinging to his suit, now being rushed toward life. Machines were wheeled in from the ambulance parked outside. Tubes, wires, frantic beeping, all of it replacing the quiet hymns the cathedral had been prepared to sing. The crowd pressed forward, whispering, shouting, filming on their phones. The billionaire alive, it would hit headlines before the night was over. But in the shadows, whispers turned to something darker. Someone declared him dead too quickly. This doesn't make sense. Could it have been intentional? The murmurs grew teeth. Eyes shifted not just to Ezra but to those who had signed his death papers, and to the girl who had uncovered the truth. Talia felt it then, the weight of all those stares, some filled with gratitude, others suspicion. Some looked at her like a savior, others like a problem too dangerous to exist. A firm hand landed on her shoulder. She flinched. It was one of the ushers, his voice low but urgent. "Stay behind me, child. People aren't happy you spoke up." She looked around. Richard Holloway's stare burned like fire, his jaw clenched tight. Another man whispered to him, and they both turned toward the exit, their faces stormy with anger. Talia's stomach twisted. She had saved a man's life, yet somehow she had also made enemies. Outside, the ambulance roared to life, its sirens splitting the afternoon sky. Ezra Kingsley, half conscious, was rushed into the vehicle. The doctors worked furiously, calling out numbers and instructions, fighting to pull him back fully into the world. Elowen tried to climb into the ambulance, but one of the guards blocked her gently. "Not yet, miss, let the doctors work." She turned, her blue eyes falling on Talia again. She hesitated, then stepped closer. You saved him," her voice cracked, fragile as glass. "If you had." Talia shook her head, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. "I just couldn't let them bury him. I saw the truth. I knew he was still here." Elowen's lip trembled, but she nodded. She wanted to say more, but her guardian pulled her away toward the family's car. The black limousine door shut, and for a moment, Talia was left standing alone on the cathedral steps, barefoot on the cold stone, the world spinning with noise around her. She should have felt proud, she should have felt like a hero, but instead she felt the weight of something heavy pressing against her chest. Because heroes are not always welcomed. News traveled fast. By evening, every television station carried the headline. Ezra Kingsley alive, funeral halted in shocking turn. Clips of the cathedral chaos flooded social media. Strangers argued online. Was it a miracle, a mistake, or something sinister? But behind the news feeds and flashing headlines, a quieter story brewed, the story of a poor black girl who had stood in front of power and refused to be silenced. And not everyone wanted that story told. That night, Talia sat on the edge of her narrow bed in the small apartment she shared with her grandmother. The room was dim, the wallpaper peeling, the smell of boiled cabbage lingering in the air. Her grandmother, a frail woman with silver hair, sat beside her. "You did a brave thing today," she whispered, holding Talia's hand. "But the brave are not always rewarded." Talia's eyes welled. "They hated me, Grandma. Some of them looked at me like I ruined everything. But if I hadn't spoken, Mr. Kingsley would have." Her voice broke. Her grandmother squeezed her hand tighter. "You listen to your heart, child. That's all that matters. The truth often makes enemies, but remember this, truth also saves lives." The words settled deep inside her. Still, when she closed her eyes, she saw Richard Holloway's glare, sharp as a knife. She didn't know why, but something told her that this was far from over. In a sterile hospital room across town, Ezra Kingsley's chest rose and fell beneath the glow of machines. Doctors hovered over him, whispering about his survival as though it were both a miracle and a problem. Elowen sat in a chair by his bedside, clutching his still hand. Her tears had dried, but her voice trembled as she whispered, "Come back, Papa, please, I need you." The machines beeped steadily, but Ezra's eyes remained closed. Alive, yes, but hovering between two worlds. And outside that hospital room, men in suits argued in low voices. "This changes everything. If he lives, the board will shift. We need to contain this before questions spread." Their words were like shadows creeping under the door, shadows that hinted at secrets deeper than a girl's courage or a billionaire's survival. Back in her tiny apartment, Talia lay awake long past midnight. The city outside buzzed with life, but inside, silence pressed against her ears. She thought about the moment she shouted in the cathedral, the moment everyone had turned against her. She thought about Elowen's blue eyes wide with gratitude and fear. She thought about Ezra's twitching fingers, the drop of moisture near his nose. And she thought about the men who looked at her like she had ruined everything. Her grandmother had already fallen asleep, but Talia whispered into the darkness as though the night itself could hear her. "I don't know why I was the only one who saw, I don't know why it had to be me, but if I was given this chance, maybe it's not the end, maybe it's the start." Her heart pounded with both fear and hope. She had stepped into a story bigger than herself, bigger than her small world of cracked walls and empty cupboards. And something deep inside her told her this: saving Ezra Kingsley was only the first step. Because when the powerful wake from the edge of death, they don't just return to life. They bring with them secrets, enemies, and battles that even the bravest child could never imagine. And Talia Brooks' barefoot poor unseen was already at the center of it. The morning after the funeral the city woke with a new kind of energy. Newspapers flew off stands, their headlines screaming in bold black letters. Billionaire Ezra Kingsley found alive in coffin. Miracle or mistake, doctors under fire. Unlikely hero, young girl halts burial. Everywhere people gathered in diners, bus stops, and train stations, they whispered about it. Some called it a blessing, some called it madness, others said it was a scandal waiting to explode. But for Talia Brooks, the 12-year-old girl at the center of it all, life hadn't magically changed. She still woke in her tiny room with a thin blanket, still heard the hum of traffic outside, still saw her grandmother's tired hands folding clothes for neighbors to earn a few coins. Only now, when she stepped outside, people stared. Some whispered, pointing. A man muttered as she passed, "That's the girl, the one who stopped the funeral." Talia's cheeks burned. She hugged her school bag closer to her chest. She didn't know if the stares meant admiration or anger, maybe both. At school, it was worse. Children crowded her desk, firing questions like arrows. "Did you really see him breathe? Were you scared? Did they pay you?" One girl sneered, "You just wanted attention. My mama said poor kids like you always make up stories." The words cut deep, but Talia kept her head down. She knew the truth. She had seen Ezra move. She had saved him, but truth often feels lonelier than lies. Far across town, inside the hospital suite guarded by private security, Ezra Kingsley's survival was stirring more than just curiosity. Doctors moved in and out, their expressions tight. Machines hummed. The billionaire lay in bed, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths, alive but fragile between sleep and waking. Alone, Kingsley hadn't left his side. Her small hand clung to his, her chin resting against the blanket. She refused to eat, refused to sleep. Every time his fingers twitched, her heart soared. Every time his breathing slowed, fear clawed at her chest. Finally, her father's lawyer, a stern woman named Marjorie Crane, stepped in. Her voice was firm but kind. "Eloan, dear, you must rest. Let the doctors handle this." Eloan shook her head, her blonde braids swinging. "What if he wakes up and I'm not here? What if he needs me?" Her voice cracked. Marjorie sighed, kneeling beside her. "He's strong, but so are you, don't forget that." Still, Eloan stayed. She couldn't shake the image of the barefoot girl at the funeral, the girl who had seen what no one else did. Without her, Papa would be gone. Eloan wanted to thank her, to know her name, but no one seemed to care about the girl now. While Eloan kept her silent vigil, men in suits gathered in a tall glass building downtown. Richard Holloway sat at the head of the long table, his jaw clenched, his fist thudding against the polished wood. "This is a disaster," he growled. "We announced his death. Stocks moved, deals shifted, and now he's alive. Do you understand what this means?" Another man, thin and nervous, adjusted his glasses. "The press is calling it a miracle. People will rally behind him." Holloway's eyes flashed. "Exactly, which means the questions will come. How did the doctors misdiagnose? Who signed the papers? And worse, what happens if Ezra remembers everything before he died?" Silence fell around the table. One man finally whispered, "What are you suggesting?" Holloway leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm saying this isn't over. A man like Ezra doesn't just fall ill without reason, and if he wakes, someone will pay for it. We need to control the story, and we need to keep an eye on the girl." "The girl," the man frowned. "The poor brat who ruined everything," Holloway snapped. "Talia Brooks, she may have saved him, but she also made us vulnerable. If people start asking why she saw what the doctors didn't, the whole thing falls apart. She must be silenced, or at least managed." A heavy chill settled in the room. That evening, Talia sat with her grandmother, watching the small TV perched on their shelf. The news showed images of the hospital, of doctors, of reporters gathered outside the gates. And then, suddenly, a picture of her. It was grainy, taken from someone's phone at the cathedral, her face mid-shout, her finger pointing at the coffin. "Local girl halts billionaire's funeral," the anchor announced. But who is she? Neighbors describe her as quiet, poor, living with her grandmother in the East Side apartments. The family has not made a statement. Talia's stomach knotted. Her life, her name was now public. Her grandmother switched off the TV, shaking her head. They should be thanking you, but they won't. Remember, child, powerful people don't like being embarrassed. You must be careful. Talia swallowed hard. Do you think I did something wrong? Her grandmother cupped her face, her eyes gentle but fierce. You did something right, but right things often make wrong enemies. At that moment, a knock rattled their door. Talia jumped. Her grandmother frowned, moving slowly to the door. When she opened it, a tall woman in a dark coat stood outside. Her hair was neat, her eyes sharp. She carried a briefcase. Good evening, she said smoothly. My name is Marjorie Crane. I'm Mr. Kingsley's lawyer. Talia's breath caught. The woman smiled faintly. He is stable but not yet awake. His daughter, Elowen, asked me to find you. She wants to thank you personally. Talia blinked, stunned. Elowen, the billionaire's daughter, wanted to see her. Her grandmother's hand tightened on her shoulder. Is it safe? She asked warily. Marjorie's eyes softened. I can't promise safety, but I can promise that your granddaughter deserves to be heard. Talia looked up at her grandmother, her heart pounding. She wanted to go. She wanted to see Elowen, to see the man she had saved. But deep inside, a whisper of fear stirred. Holloway's glare at the funeral still haunted her. Her grandmother studied her face, then sighed. If you go, you stay sharp, speak the truth, but trust carefully. Talia nodded. I'll go. The next morning, Talia found herself in a black car for the first time in her life. The leather seats smelled rich and strange. She clutched her bag tightly, her eyes wide as buildings blurred past the window. When they reached the hospital, cameras flashed outside the gates. Reporters swarmed like bees, shouting questions, shoving microphones. Is she the girl? Did she really save him? Who told her? Security guards rushed them through the chaos. Inside, the hospital was quiet, sterile, white walls, the faint smell of antiseptic. Talia's heart hammered as Marjorie led her to a guarded elevator. They rose to the top floor where the suite awaited. And there, sitting by the window with her small hands clasped, was Elowen Kingsley. She turned, her blue eyes lighting up when she saw Talia. You came, Elowen whispered. Talia froze. For a moment she didn't know how to move. She was standing in front of a girl whose life was nothing like hers. Silk dress, polished shoes, guards at the door, and yet her eyes were just eyes. Human, grateful, lonely. Elowen stood, stepping closer. She reached out and took Talia's hand. Thank you for saving my papa. Talia's throat tightened. I just did what I saw. No one else believed me. Elowen's eyes glistened. I believe you and I'll never forget it. The two girls stood there, hands clasped, two worlds colliding. Neither knew then that this fragile connection would become the very thread holding the future together. But even as they spoke softly, shadows moved beyond the hospital doors. Men whispered in corners. Phones buzzed with secret calls. Because Ezra Kingsley's survival wasn't just a miracle, it was a threat. And both girls, one rich, one poor, were now in the crosshairs of something far bigger than they could imagine. The storm had only begun. The suite was hushed, broken only by the steady rhythm of machines. Ezra Kingsley lay motionless, his chest rising and falling like a fragile tide. Tubes ran from his arms, wires traced his heartbeat on glowing screens. Talia had never been so close to wealth. The room itself felt like another world, fresh flowers in glass vases, thick curtains drawn against the sun, golden frames on the walls, but none of that mattered. All she could see was the man she had saved, pale but alive. Elowen held her father's hand, her face pressed against his arm. Papa, she whispered, you have to wake up, please. Talia stood at a distance, her toes curling against the polished floor. She wasn't sure if she should step closer. Did she even belong here? Marjorie Crane, the lawyer, touched Talia's shoulder. Come, she said softly, he should hear your voice too. Talia swallowed, her small body trembling. Slowly she walked to the bedside. Ezra's skin looked gray but not empty, not the way she had seen it in the coffin. She leaned forward, whispering, I told them you weren't gone. I knew you were still here. For a moment silence, and then his eyelids flickered. Elowen gasped, jerking upright. Papa. The doctor rushed over. His vitals are rising, keep speaking. Talia's heart thundered. She leaned closer, her voice steady but soft. You can hear us, you have to come back, your daughter needs you. Ezra's lips parted, a faint sound broken escaped his throat, not words but a whisper of life. Eloin cried out, clutching his hand tighter. Papa, please say something. The doctor adjusted the oxygen mask, nodding urgently. He's trying. Another flicker of his eyes, a shallow breath, and then just one word, cracked and weak but undeniable. Eloin. The girl's sob burst from her chest, her tears falling freely now. I'm here, Papa, I'm right here. Ezra's lips moved again, struggling. This time his voice was nearly lost beneath the machines, but both girls leaned close enough to hear. Not accident. The doctor frowned. What did he say? Marjorie's eyes narrowed. She heard it too. He said not accident. The room froze. Ezra coughed weakly, his hand twitching in Eloin's grasp. His eyes fluttered shut again, exhaustion dragging him back under. The doctor checked the monitors quickly. He's stable, but he needs rest. Eloin clung to her father's arm, but her wide eyes turned to Talia. He said it wasn't an accident. What does that mean? Talia's stomach knotted. She didn't know, but in her heart she felt the tremor of danger. Down the hall, two men in dark suits leaned against the wall, pretending to be hospital staff. Their eyes tracked every move, every word. One whispered into his phone. He spoke just one word. Crane heard it, the girls too. A low voice on the other end answered sharply. Find out how much he knows and keep the Brooks girl away. She's already seen too much. The man nodded grimly. Understood. Later that evening, as the sun sank behind the skyline, Eloin insisted on staying by her father's side. Marjorie escorted Talia to the hospital's quiet garden. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of roses. You must understand, Marjorie said, lowering her voice. If Mr. Kingsley truly believes his collapse was not an accident, then someone wanted him gone. And if that's true, you and Eloin are both in danger. Talia's breath caught. Danger, but why me? Because you changed the story, Marjorie replied firmly. If you hadn't spoken up, he would be buried, dead forever. Whoever wanted him gone won't be pleased you interfered. Talia hugged her arms around herself, her skin prickling with fear. I didn't mean to, I just wanted them to see. And that's why you're important, Marjorie said gently, because you did see, and Ezra trusts what you saw. Do not take that lightly. The garden lights flickered on, casting shadows across the path. For the first time, Talia felt the weight of her choice pressing down, not just courage, but consequence. Meanwhile, across town in a high-rise office, Richard Halloway paced like a caged lion. His phone buzzed, the screen glowing with messages. He spoke, said it wasn't an accident. Girl was there again. Public demanding answers. Halloway slammed his fist onto the desk. That fool was supposed to be gone, now he's whispering secrets, and that child always in the way. A shadow moved in the corner. A tall man in a dark coat stepped forward. His face was hard, unreadable. What do you want me to do? The man asked flatly. Halloway's jaw tightened. Watch them, both of them, and if Ezra tries to speak again, make sure no one hears him. The shadow nodded once, then vanished into the night. At the hospital, Talia was finally allowed back into the suite. Eloin sat curled in the chair, her small frame trembling with exhaustion. She looked up at Talia, her eyes swollen from crying. Do you think he's telling the truth? Eloin whispered. Talia sat beside her, hesitating before nodding. I think he knows something they don't want him to say. Eloin shivered, but who would hurt Papa? Everyone loves him. Talia's heart ached. She knew the world Eloin lived in was full of marble floors and shining cars, but it was also full of shadows money couldn't chase away. Sometimes the people closest to us hide the darkest secrets, she said quietly. The girls sat in silence, their small hands finding each other in the dim glow of the machines. Two children bound by fear, hope, and something greater than themselves. Hours passed, the hospital grew quieter, footsteps fading in the halls. Midnight crept close. Talia had drifted into a light sleep when she felt a shift, a soft sound. She opened her eyes and saw Ezra's fingers twitch again, his lips moved beneath the oxygen mask. She leaned forward quickly. Mr. Kingsley, can you hear me? His eyelids lifted just barely, his gaze found hers, weak, heavy, but aware. With great effort he mouthed 2 words. "Trust no one." Talia's breath caught, her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to call the doctor to wake Aloan, but something in his eyes stopped her, a warning. Then his eyes closed again, and the machines continued their steady hum. Talia sat back slowly, her body trembling. The words echoed in her mind, louder than the beeping, louder than her own heartbeat. Trust no one. She didn't know who to fear, she didn't know who the enemy was, but she knew this: saving Ezra Kingsley was only the beginning. Now, she and Aloan were holding secrets powerful enough to shatter empires, and someone out there was willing to do anything to bury those secrets, along with anyone who carried them. The night outside the hospital grew darker, and with it, the danger waiting in its shadows. The morning sun painted the hospital walls in muted gold, but for Talia Brooks the world felt dimmer, heavier. She hadn't slept properly. Ezra's whispered warning, "Trust no one," still clung to her thoughts like smoke she couldn't clear. She sat by the window, knees tucked to her chest, watching the traffic crawl far below. The city moved as though nothing had happened, as though no man had risen from a coffin, as though she hadn't stood before hundreds of mourners and stopped a billionaire's burial. "Are you all right?" Aloan's small voice broke through. Talia turned. Aloan was standing near her father's bed, clutching a porcelain teacup that looked too delicate for her trembling hands. She had dark circles under her eyes, evidence of another sleepless night. "I'm fine," Talia lied. Aloan's lips pressed into a thin line. She walked closer, setting the cup down on the nightstand. "You're not fine, I can see it. You keep looking at him like you're scared." Talia dropped her gaze. "I'm not scared of him, I'm scared of what's happening around him. You heard what he said. He doesn't think this was an accident." Aloan hugged her arms around herself. "Do you think someone tried to?" She stopped, unable to finish. Talia finished for her, "Kill him." The word hung in the air, cold and sharp. The door opened just then, and Marjorie Crane entered with her usual brisk stride, her heels tapping against the floor. She carried a folder thick with papers, her face unreadable. "Good morning," she greeted. "Aloan, did you eat breakfast?" Aloan shook her head. "You must," Marjorie said gently, though her eyes never left Ezra. "Your father would want you strong." "I can't," Aloan whispered. Marjorie's expression softened for a fraction of a second, then she turned to Talia. "And you, Miss Brooks, did you sleep?" Talia hesitated, a little. Marjorie studied her almost as though she could read her thoughts. Finally, she closed the folder with a snap. "There's something you both need to know. The board has called an emergency meeting tomorrow. The news of Ezra's survival is disruptive, to say the least." "Disruptive?" Aloan repeated, confused. "Yes," Marjorie said firmly. "Business deals were signed, shares were traded, and legal matters were already being processed under the assumption that your father was gone. His survival creates chaos for the company, for the investors, and for those who," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "benefited from his supposed death." Talia's stomach twisted. She didn't like the way Marjorie said it. Aloan, though, stepped forward, her small hands curling into fists. "They should be happy he's alive. Why does it sound like they wish he was?" "Because power," Marjorie replied simply, "and money. Sometimes life is inconvenient to those who want both." The silence that followed was broken by the faintest groan. Ezra Kingsley shifted in bed, his head tilting toward them. His eyes cracked open, the pale blue barely visible. Aloan rushed to his side. "Papa, I'm here." Ezra's lips parted, his voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "Aloan, water." The doctor appeared instantly, adjusting his mask and helping him sip from a straw. Ezra coughed weakly but swallowed. His hand trembled as it sought his daughter's. Aloan gripped it tight. "You're safe, Papa. Talia's here too. She saved you." Ezra's gaze shifted slowly to Talia. For the first time, their eyes met properly, his tired, hers wide and fearful. He gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible, but it filled her with warmth. And then just as quickly his eyes hardened, his lips moved again, the words gravel scraping out of his throat. "Danger close." The doctor frowned. He shouldn't be speaking too much. But Ezra ignored him, his hand tightened weakly around Aloan's. "Listen, both of you," his breath hitched. not accident, Richard," his voice broke, fading into a fit of coughing. Marjorie leaned forward sharply. "Richard who?" "Richard Halloway." Ezra's lashes fluttered. He nodded once before his strength gave out and his head sank back into the pillow. The machines beeped steadily, but his breathing evened again. He had slipped back into unconsciousness. Elowen stared at Marjorie. What does he mean? Why did he say Richard's name? Marjorie's face had gone stiff, her jaw clenched so tightly a vein pulsed near her temple. Because Richard Halloway is the chairman of Kingsley Global in Ezra's absence, if Ezra believes he was targeted, Richard would have the most to gain. Talia's chest grew cold. She remembered Halloway's furious glare at the funeral, the way he barked orders, the way his eyes had sliced through her like knives. "Then he knows we heard," Talia whispered. Marjorie's gaze snapped to her. "Precisely, which means neither of you are safe." That night the hospital grew quieter than usual. Security had been doubled, but it only made Talia more uneasy. Guards in black suits roamed the halls, earpieces tucked into their ears. Some looked trustworthy, others she wasn't so sure. She sat awake in the suite's corner, hugging her knees, while Elowen slept curled in the chair by her father's bed. The shadows seemed thicker tonight. Then click. The sound of the door unlocking. Talia froze. The knob turned slowly, too carefully, as though someone didn't want to wake them. Her heart pounded. She leapt to her feet, glancing at Elowen, who stirred faintly but didn't wake. The door creaked open and a tall figure slipped inside, dressed in hospital scrubs, a mask over his face. But Talia knew this wasn't a doctor. His movements were too precise, too quiet. He closed the door soundlessly and began moving toward Ezra's bed. Talia's chest tightened. She knew what this was. Someone was here to finish what they started. She didn't think, she just acted. "Stop," she cried, her voice cracking in the silence. The figure spun, startled, his eyes locked onto hers, cold, empty. Elowen jerked awake at her scream. "What's happening?" The man lunged forward. Talia darted in front of Ezra's bed, arms spread wide. Her knees trembled, but she didn't move. "You can't," she shouted. "I won't let you." The man paused, studying her, then with a chilling calm he spoke for the first time. "Wrong place, wrong time, you should have stayed quiet, girl." The words sank into her bones like ice. Before he could step closer, the suite door slammed open. Marjorie stormed in with 2 guards behind her. "Stop him," she barked. The intruder bolted toward the window. One guard lunged, but he slipped free, smashing the lock and forcing it open. The cold night air rushed in as he climbed onto the ledge. Talia gasped, "He's getting away." Marjorie grabbed the guard's arm before he could follow. "Don't, he wants us distracted." The man vanished into the night, swallowed by the city below. The room buzzed with panic. Elowen clung to her father's arm, tears streaking her cheeks. "He was going to hurt him, Papa, he was going to." "Enough," Marjorie snapped, though her voice trembled too. She turned to the guards. "Double the security, no one comes in unless I personally approve it, not even staff." The guards nodded and rushed out. Marjorie exhaled sharply, pinching the bridge of her nose. "It's begun." Talia swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" "The first move," Marjorie said grimly. "Richard isn't waiting, he's sending people already. He wants Ezra silenced before he can say more." Elowen's sobs shook her small frame. "What do we do?" Marjorie's eyes flicked between the 2 girls. "You stay close, and you stay quiet. Do not tell anyone what Ezra said about Richard, not the doctors, not the press, not even the guards. Do you understand me?" Talia nodded weakly, though her heart pounded in terror. "Because," Marjorie added, her voice low and sharp, "the moment the wrong ears hear it, both of you will become targets." The girls locked eyes, their hands finding each other in the dim light. They had no way out, no power, no weapons. Only each other. And a truth dangerous enough to kill for. Morning came heavy with tension. The sun streamed through the hospital curtains, but no one in Ezra Kingsley's suite felt warmth in its light. The attempted attack lingered in the air like smoke. Every shadow seemed longer, every sound sharper. Talia hadn't closed her eyes since it happened. She sat cross-legged on the couch, staring at the door, half expecting the masked man to return. Every creak of the hallway outside made her flinch. Eloan hadn't left her father's side, her hand still clasped around his, as though letting go might mean losing him forever. Marjorie Crane paced the room with a phone pressed to her ear, speaking in clipped, urgent tones. "No, increase the staff vetting. Anyone without full clearance is out. I don't care if it's a janitor or a nurse. If their background doesn't check, they're gone. Do it now." She ended the call, exhaling hard. For the first time, Talia noticed the lawyer's mask of calm cracking. Beneath her steel exterior, fear lurked. Eloan looked up, her voice trembling. "Marjorie, why would anyone want to hurt him? Papa never hurt anyone." Marjorie crouched beside her. "Because, sweetheart, when you have power, some people want to take it, and when you have wealth, others want to steal it." Her tone softened. "But your father is strong. He's still here because of you, because of both of you." Eloan glanced at Talia, her eyes watery. "Then we'll keep him safe together." Talia nodded, but her chest felt heavy. She knew she was just a girl from the east side with no money, no power, no voice. Yet somehow she had been pulled into a storm big enough to swallow people whole. Across town, the storm was already brewing. Richard Halloway stood before the board of Kingsley Global, his towering figure framed by the glass walls of the conference room. The city skyline gleamed behind him, but his mood was anything but bright. "The news has already cut into our numbers," he growled, slamming a hand against the table. "The markets don't trust instability, and this," he jabbed a finger at the morning paper, its headline screaming, "Kingsley speaks again," "is instability." A man in a gray suit cleared his throat nervously. "But sir, the public sees it as a miracle, investors are calling it." "Investors don't care about miracles," Richard snapped. "They care about control. If Ezra wakes fully and speaks, he could undo everything, deals, contracts, partnerships, all of it." A woman near the end of the table adjusted her glasses. "Then, what do you propose, Richard?" Richard leaned forward, his eyes glinting like steel. "We finish what was started. He cannot be allowed to speak, and neither can that girl." "The poor one, the funeral girl." "Yes," Richard hissed. "Talia Brooks, she's dangerous because she saw what others didn't, and now she's bonded with Eloan. If the two of them start talking—" He let the sentence trail off, but the meaning was clear. The room fell silent. Then a man with thinning hair asked quietly, "And if Ezra names you?" Richard's smile was thin, sharp as a blade. "He won't live long enough to." Back at the hospital, Marjorie received a call that made her face pale. "They're moving the board meeting forward," she told the girls grimly. "They want to declare Ezra unfit to lead. If they succeed, Richard takes full control." "But Papa's alive," Eloan protested. "He's not gone." "They don't care," Marjorie said. "They care about paperwork. If he can't stand in front of them and speak for himself, they'll write him off as good as dead." Talia's fists clenched. "Then we have to make sure he can." Marjorie studied her, surprised by the determination in her young eyes. Slowly, she nodded. "Yes, but it won't be easy. He's weak and Richard will do everything to stop him." As if on cue, Ezra stirred. His eyelids fluttered, his lips moving faintly. The doctor rushed over, checking the machines. Ezra's voice rasped out, thin but clear enough. "Meeting must stop him." Eloan leaned close, her tears falling onto his hand. "Papa, please don't talk, rest." But Ezra shook his head weakly. His gaze shifted to Marjorie, then to Talia. "Trust them, only them." The girls exchanged a glance. Marjorie bent forward, her jaw tight. "Ezra, you're not strong enough to attend that meeting." Ezra's lips curved into the faintest ghost of a smile. "Then they will." His eyes flicked to Eloan and Talia before sliding shut again. Talia's stomach dropped. Him trusting them, two children to stand against men in suits who controlled fortunes. It felt impossible. But something in the weight of his words settled in her chest like fire. That evening, Marjorie pulled the girls aside into the quiet hospital garden. The night was cool, the city lights flickering beyond the walls. "You heard him," Marjorie said. "He wants you to fight for him." "We're just kids," Talia whispered. "What can we do?" Marjorie's gaze was steady. "You can speak. You can tell the truth. You saw he wasn't dead when no one else would believe it. That truth saved him once. Now it might save his company." Eloan shivered. "But Richard, he'll be there." "Yes," Marjorie said grimly. "And he'll do everything to silence you, which is why we need proof." "Proof?" Of his betrayal, of his attempt to seize power. Ezra named him. That means somewhere there are papers, messages, evidence, if we can find them. She trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. Talia's heart pounded. The thought of sneaking into Richard's world, of chasing shadows in places she didn't belong, terrified her. But when she looked at Elowen, fragile yet burning with a quiet fire, she knew she couldn't back down. "We'll do it," Talia said. Elowen squeezed her hand, nodding firmly, "For Papa." The plan came sooner than either girl expected. Late that night, Marjorie received a tip. Richard would be in his private office at Kingsley Tower, meeting with associates. It was the only window they had to access his files undetected. "Are you mad?" the doctor hissed when Marjorie explained, "Taking children into the lion's den." "Do you have another choice?" Marjorie shot back. "If Richard wins tomorrow, Ezra loses everything, and if Ezra loses, these girls lose too." So near midnight, under the cover of shadows, a black car slid through the city streets. Talia pressed her face against the window, watching skyscrapers loom like giants. Beside her, Elowen clutched her hand tightly. When they arrived, Kingsley Tower rose above them, its glass walls glittering under the moon. "This is insane," Talia whispered. "Welcome to my life," Elowen muttered back. Inside, the building was hushed, most of the offices dark. Marjorie flashed a badge at the security desk, her expression unreadable. The guard let them through without question. They rode the elevator to the 40th floor, hearts thundering with each ding. When the doors opened, Marjorie led them down a silent corridor to Richard Halloway's office. It was locked, of course, but Marjorie pulled a small tool from her pocket, her movements practiced. Within seconds, the door clicked open. The office was enormous, mahogany desk, leather chairs, shelves lined with books no one read. A faint smell of cigars lingered in the air. "Look quickly," Marjorie urged. "Files, drives, anything." The girls scattered. Elowen searched drawers. Talia scanned the shelves. Finally, near the desk, Talia spotted a sleek silver laptop half hidden beneath papers. "Here," she hissed. Marjorie snatched it up, connecting a small drive. The screen flickered on, requiring no password. "Amateur," she muttered. Files began copying. But just as the bar reached halfway, the elevator dinged. "Voices." Talia's blood ran cold. Richard Halloway's voice. "I don't care what it takes. Kingsley must never speak again. By tomorrow, his power is mine." Elowen's eyes widened in terror. "Hide," Marjorie hissed. They ducked behind a tall cabinet just as the office door opened. Richard entered, two men in dark suits behind him. He tossed his coat onto the chair and strode toward the desk. The laptop still glowed faintly. Talia held her breath so tightly her chest ached. If he saw it, if he realized someone had been in his files. But Richard only grabbed a folder and slammed it onto the desk. "By tomorrow, it's over. Ezra's legacy dies with him, and if those girls keep meddling, I'll make sure they vanish." The words stabbed through Talia like knives. Beside her, Elowen's hand shook in hers, but her eyes burned with something fierce: hatred. Richard paced, muttering curses, then finally stormed out with his men. Only when the elevator dinged again did Marjorie move. She grabbed the laptop, yanking the drive free. "We have what we need, now let's get out before he notices." They slipped back into the hallway, hearts racing, every step echoing louder than the last. As they reached the elevator, Talia dared to breathe again. But deep inside, she knew the truth: this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Because Richard Halloway had declared war. And now, for the first time, they had the proof to fight back.